Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, and thank you all who took part in our Election Day U courses that were held a couple of weeks back, and one of the professors at that university is Clarabell Wheeler, former member of the Virginia Board of Elections. She's a member in a committee for the Virginia Electoral Board Association, and she can, with no pretense whatsoever, demystify all the stuff and make it so clear that you walk out of a meeting with her saying, oh, okay, I know I can do this, and with the full confidence that you can be a poll watcher, an election official, you name it, she can explain it to you so you feel empowered for it. And thank you so much for being one of our professors at the Virginia Institute Election Integrity Summit. There is no more important issue. I mean, we can talk about tax policies and police, Clarabell, but I mean, if we can't make sure every single voter casts one valid vote, all the rest of it really doesn't make any difference, does it?
Joe, you are absolutely correct, and I really appreciate that wonderful introduction. You have crystallized, as you usually do, the essence of what's important, and that is having free, fair, safe, and legal elections. If we don't have faith in our elections, we're going to go into chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And the watchword for everyone should be easy to vote, hard to cheat.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need.
I have seen more evidence, more physical, tangible proof that somebody that wasn't supposed to vote voted than I have seen a single soul that has said, yeah, I was turned away and I wasn't allowed to vote. How do they get away with this narrative of vote suppression when I've challenged people like Mark Warner? Show me somebody who was turned away at the poll and not allowed to vote, because I have at least a half a dozen evidences of people that were deceased or in any way, shape, or form voted in several places. So I don't know how we lose this narrative, Clarabell. What are people like me doing wrong in this?
As my father used to say, if somebody tells a lie often enough, they begin to believe their own lie. And I think that's what's happened with this disenfranchisement or voter suppression or whatever. Certainly nobody in my world, nobody who is promoting liberty wants to refuse any legitimate voter the right or the ability to vote.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
But we want it to be one vote, one legal person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to register to vote, We have so many different ways to register and so many different ways to vote that no one, and I agree with you 100%, I know of no case nationwide, I know of no case in which a legitimate person has been refused the opportunity to vote, period.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the lie continues to be perpetrated. And it's simply not true.
Mm-hmm. We see we see cases, and it breaks my heart because I feel like these are, like with the university kid at James Madison a few years ago. I feel like these are people who, are being taken advantage of. I mean, if this was, for other things, we'd have people arrested for indecency and lewd and lascivious behavior. But we seem to act like holding an elective office is so important. And I'm pretty sure that my faith has never said to me that when I get to, my reckoning in the sky, that my voting record is going to be a part of it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I'm not in the right church, but I don't know who I voted for is going to be counted as part of my good works.
I don't think so. The Lord I know doesn't care how you vote.
Right.
He just wants you to love Him and do good works and be on His team. But Let's go back to the case that you cited. The case in Harrisonburg happened 4 or 5 years ago. A paid operative of a party was getting paid per name he got registered to vote. And so he went out to the local church graveyard, and he got names off of tombstones. And he filled out voter registration applications, and he made up Social Security numbers. And he submitted, I think it was 18 applications. The local registrar recognized one of those names as a former judge who had died the year before. But before she recognized it, a letter was sent out to all new voters, and it went out, and the judge's widow got the letter, and it said, "Dear," whatever the man's name was, "welcome to being a registered voter in the city of Harrisonburg."
Boy.
And this widow looked at this and thought, there's a problem, and called the registrar. And so they went through the records, and they found all of the applications that this paid young man had submitted, and there were 18, that he had just made up out of whole cloth. These were imaginary people. And when they finally prosecuted and went through all the loops and hoops and plea bargaining and whatever, the man had committed 5 felonies. Excuse me, class 5 felonies for 18 different times.
Jeez.
He should have been in jail, and the jail put on top of him. But no, he got a slap on the wrist and a misdemeanor because the court system did not see the value in legal elections.
Of course not. If that's going to be the case, and I talk about this with listeners frequently and members, if we can't count on the judicial system, and that's the frightening part, is that when you finally get a case like this into court and the judge says, well, I really don't want to be seen as interfering in the electoral process, or whatever convenient way they can come up with writing their brief to either dismiss the case or plead down the case. I don't know. Maybe we just have to go the other way and reward the industrious and say there are no rules. Whoever gets to vote the most wins.
Well, I frequently in jest said, well, let's just put voting machines on every street corner and vote every time you go by. I've stopped saying that because I'm afraid somebody will take me up on it and say, that's a really good idea. We'll run that bill through the General Assembly, and as long as a particular party controls the General Assembly, we'll get it through, and as long as we've got a governor that will assign anything we send him, it'll be law, and pretty soon there'll be optical scanners on every street corner.
Yep.
So I don't say that anymore.
Nothing is too crazy to say anymore, Clarabell.
Well,
so
voting with no ID. No ID.
Mm-hmm.
No ID. You have to have a photo ID to go into the Patrick Henry building on Court Hill, on Capitol Hill in Richmond.
Yep.
Anything requires a photo. To use Medicare or Medicaid, you must have a photo ID to reduce the chance that someone else is going to use your Medicaid or Medicare benefits illegally.
Mm-hmm. It's good enough for that.
Right.
Well, then how do they... And this is the part I really am puzzled about, because it is, to me, one of the most racist things I've heard when you listen to people say, well, this targets the black community because they're less likely to have a photo ID. What?
Ridiculous.
So how do...
What the party that says that is saying, quote, you people, because of the color of your skin, don't have sense enough to get a photo ID. That is the most ridiculously racist statement that could possibly be made. Absolutely ridiculous. Everybody can get a photo ID. The Commonwealth of Virginia will give you one for free. All you have to do is go into the registrar's office and get one. So we need to return some sanity by having a photo ID so we can have legal people voting.
We're visiting with Clarabell Wheeler. She's part of our election integrity group here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, former member of the State Board of Elections. And she's done it all when it comes to election integrity, and she's seen it all. We just saw the fight Texas had to go through to get, some standards and practices back in their voting system. And that's Texas. What has to happen in Virginia, and even if there are electoral changes in November to which parties are in majority, both in the governor's mansion and in the House, what cases have to be made so that we don't watch every Democrat in the Virginia House, go to D.C. for the weekend so that we can't call quorum?
Ooh, we haven't had the call quorum problem happen in Virginia, but certainly they tried it in Texas. In the November election, not only on the ballot will you have the three executives, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, you've also got every House of Delegates seat, all 100. Which means you can, in this election, change the majority of the delegates in the House of Delegates. The people who sit and vote in that body, which is 1/2 of the General Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you can't change the makeup of the Senate this year because the Virginia senators are not on the ballot this year, you can change the makeup and distribution by party of the House of Delegates. And even though one House cannot pass new bills because they're dependent on the other House substantiating, upholding that bill when it crosses over to the other House, a new makeup of the House of Delegates can block any further bills from going through that could make our election system even less reliable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the value. And then when the Senate comes up for election, you can change the Senate. And certainly if you change the executive branch, the governor, the lieutenant governor, attorney general, then you've got people who will look at the law with a different light and more sunlight, if you will. And so you have to, unfortunately or fortunately, I think fortunately, we can't turn over everything in Virginia in one election. So we do it piecemeal. We do the House and the executive committees. And, of course, the down ticket. I mean, there's school boards and there are board of supervisors. If you look around the state, there are lots of, and I really don't like the term down ticket ballot. Or down ballot. I mean, they're important. School board, great balls of fire. I think everybody in Virginia knows how important school board is after this year. I mean, if you don't have a reliably honest, thoughtful school board, look in Albemarle County how much of the tax base in Albemarle County is at the complete control of the school board.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge.
60%.
The vast majority. Exactly. Say that again so everybody hears it.
60%.
That's the number halfway between 50 and 70. 6-0. Huge amount of money. Those people are important. It's the same one.
When the General Assembly convenes, and this is going to also be, something that I would love to see them look at, because I think the way they vote in their committees also can be problematic, because and they'll pick and choose. They'll say, it's not every committee, but it seems like every key committee is way unbalanced to makeup of the House. The House is not that far removed from 50-50 that some committees should be 9-3 on one party. And I think this needs to kind of be put down, because you could very easily get a Republican that decides they don't want to get yelled at about this to all of a sudden throw a spanner in some sort of election reform. But as you said, we don't radically swing. They've carved out a lot of the protections. But the framework is still there that we could put back in some of this stuff, right, Clarabell?
Absolutely, and I had to smile when you said the makeup of the committees and the subcommittees. If your party representation in the House of Delegates is 49-51 or 52-48, something very, very, very close, then your committee representation should reflect that number. But as you just said, there were committees that were 9 members from one party and 2 or 3 members from the other party, including privileges and elections.
Yep. The key ones.
Those are key. I remember vividly early in this General Assembly, and all the meetings are on Zoom, so you're looking at a Zoom meeting of the House Privileges and Election, and a perfectly legitimate, really nonpartisan. This was not hair on fire election law that this bill was proposing. It was really, I thought, everybody should vote for this bill. It's perfectly reasonable. But a Republican carried the bill, meaning a Republican was standing in front of House P&E Subcommittee one morning, 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever time, presents the bill, and into a live open mic on an open Zoom call, a member of the Privileges and Elections Committee said, "Oh, that's a Republican bill. We're not going to vote for that."
God, gotta love the.
He said that out loud into an open mic on a Zoom call that's going all over the Commonwealth. Well, I'm glad everybody heard it.
Yep, and even more so now. Sometimes the hubris, you don't have to read too much Greek mythology to know what happens when you start to think, you are that and the proverbial bag of chips. Which is why we have to do, honest people, have to do everything that we can do to ensure elections have every measure that we can summon of integrity. And the only way we can do that is to participate. One of my, I've heard you quote Edmund Burke, a Scotsman, one of my favorite people. He had just such wonderful quotes. You can go Edmund Burke quote all day long. But one of them that everybody knows is, all that evil, that's a capital E, all that evil needs to succeed is that good men do nothing. Absolutely true. And we see it.
And we see it. If people want to sit and go backwards, they will go backwards. If they want to stand up and participate in the process that keeps us, as Ronald Reagan said, one election cycle away from chaos, they will get involved. And this year, you can be a poll watcher. You can be an officer of election. You can work as a registrar's staff in any election in Virginia, and make sure that you've got honest eyes on what's going on. And that's the only way you can do it. You're not going to do it sitting at home and complaining. Right.
And as much as we love callers on our radio programs, that's too late. Clarabell, and can people still do this? We're getting ready to start voting in a couple of weeks. Are these opportunities still available for whatever we wind up doing in 2021, whether it's, vote in person, vote by mail? I know there are some districts that very proudly said they had poll watchers in the registrar's office every day for the 45 days of pre-voting. watching the registrar open the envelopes. I mean, it's hard to do, but many hands make light work.
Amen. Maybe you've got one day a week to volunteer. Great. But as I say at every one of these election integrity poll watcher officers of election classes, if you're going to bother to get up in the morning, brush your teeth, comb your hair, put your shoes and socks on and go out the door, you may as well stay all day. I mean, you're there. What's more important? But maybe you can't. Maybe you can only stay 3 or 4 hours. Every little bit helps.
Yep.
Every day. And yes, we are having officer of election classes, poll watcher classes, and remember that the in-person absentee voting is done in the registrar's office, wherever it takes place. If it's 30 miles down the road from the registrar's office, it's still the registrar's office.
Yep.
And you are hired and paid. Hey, paid. Everybody likes to get paid. It's a paid job. And you're working as either an assistant registrar or registrar's staff. Different registrars have it budgeted in different ways. And yes, we are teaching people how to do this. We have been doing teaching in person all over Virginia. We've got one about to be scheduled right here in Albemarle County, but there are classes all over Fairfax, Loudoun. We've got one scheduled for 2 weeks in Prince William, Chesterfield, Henrico, the beach. And for me, in Albemarle County, anything east of Petersburg is the beach. So all of you guys who are in the beach, it's anything east of Petersburg.
Well, how do people find out? Is there a best way? Should they contact you for the information about signing up for this?
The easiest way is to go to the Virginia for Fair Elections.
Okay.
Or you can go to the Virginia Institute for Public Policy.
Mm-hmm. I know that web address very well.
And everybody should know because they've been around a long time. They are not some fly-by-night just popped up. And find out where the classes are. Mm-hmm. People can contact me. I mean, I'm happy to direct traffic. We are getting ready to produce these as Zoom classes because it's a long way to drive 3 or 4 hours to the beach and back. Mm-hmm. But I've been doing it. It's great. I love doing it. You meet wonderful people, and when you can look people in the eye and watch their faces change as they learn, they see, gee, is that really what the law says? Yep, that's what it says. Now, this is what you can do about it. Here's your job. And as an officer of election, you must apply to the registrar's office in any locality. You put in an application. You can do it online by going to your county or city website, drop into voting and election or voter and a registrar's slot, and it'll say Officer of Election application. I invite people to either do it online or print it, fill it out, take it into your registrar's office and say, I'm Joe Thomas and I want to be an officer of election. And if they say, we've already got enough, then it's, may I see that list? Politely. Not in a, just, wow. I thought people were kind of short officers. Can I see your list? And the Code of Virginia specifically says you must have parity. That means equal numbers of R's and D's. Do you have equal numbers of R's and D's in every one of your precincts? And then the stammering starts.
Almost automatically.
It's just, may I see the list? The list is a public document.
They can't say no. Well, they will, but they're not allowed to stay on no.
Exactly. And every unit chair is entitled to get that list every month as the Board of Election, the local electoral board, votes to have people accepted to be officers of election. And then the local party chairman looks at that list and says, yes, that person can represent our party as an officer of election. Now, once you become an officer of election, you take your party hat off, and you're non-biased. You're not even bipartisan. You're non-biased. You're non-party. You follow the law. You do what you're supposed to do. But in the law, there are certain jobs in the precincts that shall be done. That means must be done by two officers of elections representing two opposite parties. So you've got to know, the chief officer of election has to know who the R's are and who the D's are, so that if you've got a job such as emptying the ballot box because it's full, you got to have one R and one D doing that. There's certain jobs that require party identification. And that's why you have to have party parity, equal numbers of R's and D's. You can have independents. There really are people who truly are independent.
Yeah, sure.
And that's fine. They can be independents, and they can work as officers of election as independents. But if a registrar or electoral board is going to assign an independent as a chief or an assistant chief officer of election, the party chair of the party not represented in that pairing has to be noticed, so that party chair can find someone to take that job representing his or her party. Now, if they don't step up and they say, I don't care, then the independent gets the job.
And in the worst case scenario, and it happens all too frequently, they go find somebody who's not doing anything from the other party and say, you're going to be the Republican today. So as shaking your head as that may be, that's how it goes. Again, virginiainstitute.org. Find out more about our election integrity program. Get with Clarabell. You see how easy it is. You see how well-versed in this she is. And I do so greatly appreciate everything you do beyond just visiting with us this weekend. And thank you so much, and have a marvelous rest of the Labor Day weekend.
Go out and volunteer. Thank you, Joe.
And thank you for listening this week to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Until next weekend, enjoy the long weekend, and we'll reconvene next weekend for you with more information. Until then, so long, and thanks for all the fish.